A poor woman with a baby was cruelly thrown out by a millionaire, but when the mother saw him approach her child, she froze at what he was doing. As the coffee brewed on the stove, Linda mapped out her day. She muttered quietly to herself, planning her tasks to make a living by selling candy at the traffic lights. "I won't need to make too many candies today," she thought, remembering yesterday's slow sales. "There are plenty left over, so I'll try selling them again." Gary, her 5-year-old son, was the light of her life. He'd always wake up with a big smile, ready to explore everything around him. "Mum, do you think we'll see a dog at the park today? I love it when they chase the ball." "I think they're smiling too," Gary would say, his eyes sparkling with curiosity and excitement. Linda would chuckle at his comment and reply, "Maybe, sweetheart. Dogs love the park just as much as you do." After breakfast, Linda walked Gary to school. The journey was long, but they used the time to chat about the little things in life. "Mom, why is the sky blue?" Gary would ask, gazing up with awe. Linda would patiently explain about sunlight and the atmosphere, marveling at his endless curiosity. "It's like a big rainbow that can't pick just one color," she'd conclude with a smile. After dropping Gary off, Linda would head home, preparing for her day selling candy on the street. "These sweets won't sell themselves," she'd say as she set out, each passing car a chance to scrape together enough to support her small family of just herself and Gary. By the time she went back to pick him up in the afternoon, their reunion was always joyful. "Mom, you won't believe what I learned today," Gary would shout, running into her arms. He'd eagerly recount the day's lessons, each detail a fresh adventure. Linda listened, amazed at her son's ability to absorb so much, and she'd respond, smiling with pride. "I always believe in you, my dear. You're my little genius." At night, just before bedtime, Linda would read a story to Gary. As she read, her mind drifted, reflecting on the day and the challenges that lay ahead. "Mom, when I grow up, I want to be strong and brave, like the heroes in the stories," Gary would murmur, already half asleep. With her heart full of love, Linda would softly respond, "And you will be, my love. You're already my greatest hero." She'd kiss his forehead, switch off the light, and quietly leave the room, carrying with her a silent promise to fight for a future where Gary's dreams could come true. In a high-rise building downtown, George, a wealthy businessman and owner of a network of apartment complexes, sat comfortably in his chair, turning slightly to face Dennis, his most trusted employee, who stood nearby, attentive. "Dennis, I've noticed a concerning rise in late rent payments in our properties. This is unacceptable. We need a solution that sends a clear message: zero tolerance for delinquency. I want you to visit each one of those tenants. Remind them what's at stake if they keep delaying payments. It's not just the roof over their heads, it's the stability of their lives." George's voice was calm, but carried a sharp edge Dennis knew all too well. "Got it, boss. But if they genuinely can't pay, if they have legitimate reasons?" Dennis asked, already aware that compassion wasn't something George valued highly. George fixed his gaze on Dennis, a cold glint in his eye. "We're not in the charity business, Dennis. If they can't pay, we'll find someone who can. And for those who hide behind excuses, make sure they understand the cost of being late. Use your talent to persuade, but keep it low-key. We don't need any unnecessary attention." With a nod, Dennis understood. It was time to reinforce George's control over his tenants, making sure the message was heard loud and clear. That morning, Linda's day started like any other, a calm routine of getting Gary ready for school and working on her sewing tasks. But that peace was shattered by firm knocks on the door. With a sense of foreboding, Linda walked over and opened it, finding herself face to face with a man with a stern expression. "In the name of Mr. George," he said. "My name is Dennis. I'm here on Mr. George's orders. You and your son need to vacate this apartment by the end of the week. You're over a month behind on rent, and it's time to make space for a more reliable tenant," the man said, his voice icy and detached, giving no sign of empathy for a single mother and her child facing eviction. Trying to keep her composure, Linda replied, "This can't be right. I know we're struggling, but I'm doing everything I can to catch up. Isn't there any way we can get just a couple more days until I gather the money? My son and I truly don't have anywhere else to go." Without a hint of sympathy, the man responded, "Mr. George's decisions are always final. There's no room for negotiation when his word's been given. And even if I wanted to, I can't help you. I apologize for the inconvenience, but you should begin making arrangements to leave as soon as possible." Linda, desperate, tried one last plea, her words stumbling out. "Please, there has to be some understanding of our situation. My son is just a child, and we have no family or friends who can take us in. Isn't there any way to allow us a little more time?" The man, still unmoved, replied, "My orders are clear, and I'm not allowed to make exceptions on behalf of Mr. George. I'm sorry about your circumstances, but believe me, I can't assist. You'll receive a formal notice, and you'll need to comply or face a forced eviction." After the man left, Linda closed the door slowly, turning to face Gary, who looked up at her, searching for reassurance. She managed to muster a smile, saying, "Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll figure something out. Together, we can get through anything." Her words were as much an attempt to comfort Gary as they were to convince herself that somehow she'd find a way out. Linda spent the rest of the day in a whirlwind of emotions, trying to think of a solution to the urgent challenge ahead. She knew time was running out, and that she needed to act quickly to protect both herself and Gary. With limited options and her candy sales dwindling, Linda decided to reach out to her community for help, hoping for support or even a temporary solution. She headed to a small local grocery store where she ran into the store's owner, an old friend. "Mr. Douglas, I'm begging you. Do you know anyone who might have a room or even just a small space for us to rent? Please let me know if you do." Linda's voice trembled, though her resolve was unwavering as she pleaded with the owner of the local grocery store. "My son and I are about to be evicted for falling behind on rent, and I have nowhere else to turn. We're close to being out on the streets." Linda's situation clearly affected Mr. Douglas as he gazed at her with great empathy. "Linda, I can only imagine what you're going through, and my heart aches for you and Gary," he replied. "I'll ask around and see if there's anyone who might be able to help. I can't make any promises, though. It seems like everyone I know is stretched for space themselves, me included. But you're not alone in this." Thankful, but still anxious, Linda continued knocking on doors, sharing her story with anyone who would listen. Each rejection felt like another weight added to her burdens, but she pushed on, determined to stay strong for Gary. His worried, admiring gaze kept her going, knowing he relied on her resilience to find a way out before things got worse. That evening, back in their small apartment, soon to no longer be theirs, they sat together at the dining table. Silence filled the room, broken only by Linda's soft voice as she tried to lift their spirits. "Gary, sweetheart, we'll find a way through this. We'll always have each other, and as long as we do, we can face anything." Gary looked at her with a blend of innocence and wisdom beyond his years. "I know, Mum. I just wish I could help more. Everything's going to be okay, right? You're my hero, and I know no problem's too big for you. Right?" His words, filled with hope and belief, strengthened Linda, reminding her why she fought so hard. As night settled, Linda stayed up, planning her next moves to avoid an even darker outcome. She knew tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was determined to find a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. Beside her, Gary clung to a glimmer of hope, that small light pushing Linda forward even when the path ahead felt overwhelming. "My son, I can't bear for you to sleep without a proper bed, or sit without a decent table for your meals. I'll fight for us, even if I haven't figured out how just yet," Linda whispered quietly, her gaze on Gary. Morning arrived with a weight that was nearly unbearable for Linda and Gary. They had exhausted every option, now forced to confront the brutal reality of being without a place to call home. With heavy hearts, they packed their few belongings into worn bags, each movement echoing the deep sorrow and immobilizing uncertainty they felt about the future. Standing at the door was Mr. George's enforcer, sent to check their departure. "Linda, I truly wish things didn't have to happen this way, but I've done all I could within my orders," Dennis said, his voice tinged with regret yet resolute. "I know this is hard, and I hope you both find a good place soon. Maybe with a friend or family," he added, trying to offer some consolation. Linda, gripping Gary's hand tightly, looked up at him with tears in her eyes, yet there was no bitterness. "Thank you for your patience with us. We'll find our way somehow," she replied, with a quiet dignity that even caught Dennis by surprise. With that, Linda and Gary left their apartment, leaving behind not just a home, but also a piece of their lives and most of their belongings. Those first days on the streets were the hardest. Without work or customers placing orders, Linda had no money for even a cheap motel. They sought shelter in parks and under bridges, every night bringing a bone-deep cold and a loneliness that weighed on their spirits. Linda did everything she could to keep Gary fed and warm, putting aside her own needs to lessen his suffering. "Mum, I'm so cold," murmured Gary one night, curled under a thin blanket that barely shielded him from the biting wind. "I know, my love, I know," Linda replied, holding him close, wrapping him in as much warmth as she could muster. "Let's stay close to keep warm. Dawn will come soon. I promise. Tomorrow, we'll find a warmer place." As they huddled together on one of those bitter nights when hope seemed like a flickering ember, a figure approached. It was Adam, a local journalist known for shining a light on the struggles of the less fortunate in the community. "Sir, I work with families here who need support," Adam said, his voice full of genuine concern. "I'd like to help. I don't have much in terms of financial resources, but perhaps sharing your story could bring attention to your situation, and maybe someone can offer even more than I can." Linda, though wary and surprised, was desperate for any glimmer of hope, and agreed. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but grateful. "Any help is a blessing right now. I just want a better future for my son. He deserves more than this." Her words, filled with both desperation and maternal love, marked the start of a new journey for her and Gary. Perhaps finally, they were on a path toward finding the light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. Linda and Gary, now joined by Adam, moved to a more secluded park bench where they could talk more privately. Adam was eager to understand what had led them to their current struggles, and gently asked Linda about her and Gary's story. Uncertain of where to begin, Linda took a shaky breath. "We had a normal life, a little apartment, a promising routine, and then everything crumbled after Gary's father passed away 4 years ago." Her voice wavered, a mix of sorrow and resilience. Adam nodded in understanding, urging her to continue. "Could you tell me more about Gary's father? Who he was? What happened?" he asked gently, trying not to press too hard. "He was a good man," Linda said, her voice soft with remembrance. "A loving father, a devoted husband. But he got sick, very sick, and we couldn't afford the treatment he needed. He never talked about his family, so we couldn't even reach out to them for help. He fought for months, but in the end, epilepsy took him from us. And with him went not only our financial stability, but all the love we had, Linda recalled, her tears beginning to fall freely down her face. Sensing her pain, Adam offered her a handkerchief. "I'm truly sorry for your loss, Linda. I believe your son's father must have been an incredible man, and I'm sure he'd be proud of how you're raising him." "I wonder," he asked, "did you try to negotiate with the landlord about the rent before the eviction?" The look on Linda's face showed the frustration she felt from the injustice she was facing, and she shared her story with Adam. "Yes, but we didn't get any response. Shortly after the rent was overdue, a man representing Mr. George, the apartment owner, knocked on my door and told me I had to leave with my son within 2 days. I asked if they could extend the time just a bit, but they refused, giving me no chance to hold on to our home. I promise, Linda, I'll do everything I can to help. We'll get your story out there, and I believe people will want to support you. You're not alone in this." "Trust me," Adam said, his voice steady and full of resolve. From that moment, he felt that he was carrying part of Linda and her son's story. Then he continued, "Look, my house isn't huge, but I know it can be a place for both of you to feel safe with me for as long as you need. If you accept my help, we'll be close, which will also make it easier for me to work on the story I want to do about you two." Linda nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. The rough experience of living on the streets with her son hadn't been easy, and she was ready to accept Adam's support. "If our presence in your home is welcome and it won't be a burden, we'll gladly accept, and I promise we'll move to our own place as soon as we can. The idea of the story sounds wonderful, and I'm eager to expose George's cruelty and seek some justice." After accepting Adam's offer, Linda and Gary began a new chapter, albeit temporary, in a safe and comforting environment. Adam, for his part, felt honored to help, fully aware of the positive impact he was having on their lives. "Don't worry about the space or any inconvenience. What matters is that you're safe and comfortable. We'll make this report together and reveal the truth about George," Adam declared, matching Linda's passion for justice and change. Over the next few days, as they settled into a new routine at Adam's house, their bond grew closer, building on trust and a budding friendship. Gary, in particular, began seeing Adam as a mentor, someone who offered not only shelter, but also genuine care for his future and well-being. Preparing for the report felt like a shared mission. Adam spent countless hours interviewing Linda, capturing every detail of her and Gary's story, along with the injustices they'd suffered at George's hand, all of which he documented meticulously on a blog. "We want this story to not just expose the truth, but also inspire others to stand up against similar injustices," Adam explained, arranging his notes for the upcoming report. Meanwhile, in a grand, opulent room, George spoke with Dennis about the company's latest venture. "Listen, Dennis, we've got a golden opportunity with this new real estate project. It's not just about putting up more buildings. It's about raising the standard of living for those we consider less fortunate. Of course, that means relocating some current residents to other homes. A few of them have been particularly resistant to the generous offers we've made for their move. That's where you come in. I need you to make them see that moving is in their best interest. There's no need for extreme measures. Just focus on the benefits," George added, leaning back with a calculated smile. Dennis, understanding the task, asked about the approach, and if they aren't convinced, some of these residents have deep ties to their communities. With a knowing smile, George responded, "Well then, we'll just have to help sever those ties. There's more than one way to encourage cooperation, Dennis. Get creative. Remember, we're not doing anything illegal, just facilitating a smoother transition to a new place where they won't be in our way. And of course, those who cooperate might even see some improvements in their new homes. It's about seeing the big picture, Dennis. After all, we're improving the city. Meanwhile, back in his office, Adam began organizing his thoughts for Linda's report. Adam sat at his computer, contemplating the best approach for the video. How can I make people truly connect with Linda and Gary's story, he wondered. He knew the story carried weight, but he needed the right angle to capture the audience's attention and evoke their empathy. I'll start by introducing who they are, helping people get close to them so that everyone can see that, despite everything, they haven't lost hope, Adam decided. He pictured the scenes he'd use, aiming to capture the reality of Linda and her son, while also showing their resilience. He also realized it was crucial to blend emotion with information. I need to reveal not only their human side, but also the hard facts, the truth behind what happened to them because of Mr. George, he thought. This isn't just their story. It reflects bigger issues affecting many. Strengthened by this idea, Adam began to draft a plan. This video would be more than a story. It would be a call to action, a push for change. Adam knew he had a tough road ahead, but was prepared to take it on. He spent the night sketching out what he would say in the video, shaping Linda and Gary's story in a way that would resonate deeply and expose the injustice they had faced at the hands of someone hiding behind wealth. Tomorrow, I'll talk to Linda, and we'll make this happen. As dawn's first light spilled into the room, Adam finally allowed himself a moment of rest. He knew the day would bring its own challenges, but he was ready for them. Linda, Gary, we're in this together from now on, no matter when or how it ends, he vowed quietly in the office, watching the sunrise, and we're going to win. With daylight pouring over the city streets, Adam prepared for an important meeting with Linda and Gary. The fatigue from his late-night planning had turned into resolve. He was ready to speak to them as soon as they were awake. After a short wait in the living room, Linda and Gary emerged to greet Adam, who welcomed them with a warm smile. Good morning. Today's the big day for the report, and I have to say, I believe in the strength of your story, Adam began. What we do today can start to change things, not only for you, but for so many others facing similar situations. Linda held Gary's hand, nodding. We're ready. After all we've been through, if our story can help someone, it'll be worth it. I don't want any mother to go through what I did with my son. Perfect, said Adam, setting up his camera. I'll ask a few questions, but I really want you both to speak from the heart. This isn't just about what happened, but about how you felt, what you learned, and what you hope for in the future. As they got ready for the recording, Adam explained to Linda and Gary how they would share the video, emphasizing the goal of reaching as many people as possible. Once it's ready, we'll share it on every social platform, news site, and anywhere it can make an impact. I'll reach out to journalist friends and activists to help spread the word. It won't be easy, but I promise, your story will be heard, and we'll stand together for justice. With everything prepared, Adam, Linda, and Gary headed to a beautiful park in the city, chosen for the calm atmosphere it provided. While setting up the camera, Adam felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. This video wasn't just a reporting project, it was a mission, a call to action. I'm ready, announced Adam. We'll start when you both are ready, he said, adjusting the camera's focus on Linda. With a nod, she began, her voice steady, despite the obvious nerves. My name is Linda, and this is the story of how my son, Gary, and I were forced to leave our home. But more than that, it's about resilience, about holding on to hope, even when it feels like everything is lost. Despite his age, Gary looked straight into the camera, his expression serious. I just want people to know that, even when things were hard, my mum always did her best for me, and made it work the best she could. She's my hero, and she'll always be my biggest inspiration, he said, his voice full of pride and love. Hearing Gary's words, Adam felt a lump in his throat, reminded of the greater purpose behind this recording. Linda went on to share more about the challenges they faced after their eviction, the struggles to find a new home, and the kindness of strangers who had become friends along the way. 4 years ago, my husband passed away, just a year after our son was born. We were living in an apartment, and he was the one supporting us financially. But when he died, everything changed overnight. I found myself with no choice but to make a living selling candies at traffic lights, but we managed to survive, each day finding our own way. Linda spoke, her gaze fixed on the camera. Behind the lens, Adam asked her gently, "And what led to you being evicted from your apartment?" Taking a deep breath, Linda answered, visibly emotional. "My candy sales kept dropping, and soon, my income wasn't enough. I had to delay the rent by a month, scraping together every cent I could. Then one day, I got a visit from a man working for Mr. George, a businessman with a cold, relentless reputation who owned not only my apartment, but countless others across the city. He informed me that I had 2 days to leave the apartment. I pleaded for a little more time. I was so close to catching up, but he simply repeated Mr. George's words. The decision is final. So I was forced to leave my home, my son Gary and I ending up on the streets until we crossed paths with Adam, a young man with a big heart who didn't think twice about offering us help. Adam stepped in at this point, turning to the viewers. And that's why we're here today, sharing Linda and Gary's story. We're here to make a difference and help them start anew. But they're not the only ones who need support. There are many others out there waiting for a helping hand, and that's what I'm dedicated to bringing to light on this channel. We're not going to let cruelty defeat humanity. Money can never be worth more than compassion, the young journalist declared to the camera with conviction. I want to thank everyone who stopped to listen to our story, Linda added, gripping Gary's hand tightly. Your empathy and support mean everything to us and to those going through hardships. Don't give up. There is always a light, even in the darkest moments, and you must keep searching for it. Adam powered down the camera, realizing they had captured something deeply meaningful. Thank you so much, Linda and Gary. Your courage in sharing this will inspire countless others. We'll make sure this message is heard. They exchanged a look of unity, bound not only by the story they had shared, but by a shared resolve to shape the future, starting with the power of storytelling. Moments after the moving recording with Linda and Gary, Adam felt a rush of mixed emotions, both anxious and hopeful, while sitting with the family in his office. He knew the video held the potential to touch hearts and spark change, yet he was also aware of the challenges and resistance they might encounter along the way. With the camera still in hand, he settled in front of his computer, ready to take the next step. It's time to show the world your strength and courage, Adam said to Linda and Gary as he uploaded the video to his social media, attaching a powerful message. This is the story of Linda and Gary, a fight against adversity and a quest for justice. But it's also a call to action for each of us, urging us to open our eyes to the injustices around us. Watch, share, and help us make a real difference. The video had just gone live, but the response was immediate. Notifications exploded across Adam's screen. Messages of support, shares, and waves of encouragement poured in from all corners. Strangers reached out with heartfelt comments, showing solidarity and understanding. As the hours passed, Linda and Gary's story began to spread like wildfire. The video was quickly going viral, with each view and comment amplifying their message. By evening it had reached thousands, and by nightfall the story was resonating with even more people than they'd imagined possible. Adam's eyes scanned the endless flow of comments and shares, Linda, sitting beside him, was visibly moved. "Adam, I can't believe how much people are connecting with our story," she said, wiping away a tear as she read comment after comment from strangers who had pledged their help and encouragement. Each message seemed more heartfelt than the last, expressing genuine empathy and offering words of hope. Gary, usually reserved, managed a small shy smile. "It's like we suddenly have this big family of people we don't even know, but who care so much. It's amazing. How can people be so kind and generous toward complete strangers?" he wondered aloud, his voice filled with disbelief and gratitude. "I feel so happy seeing all of this support." Adam felt a rush of emotion too, gratitude swelling in his chest as he looked at Linda and Gary. "This is just the beginning," he said, with newfound determination. "We'll use this attention not only to help you two, but also to bring attention to others who are suffering silently at the hands of people like George. This is exactly why I started my social media channels and blog, to give people a voice, to show the world what's really happening, and to inspire change." Adam's broad smile stretched across his face as he watched the notifications continue to roll in. The video's view count was climbing to numbers he had never seen before in his work. All around, people were reaching out, friends, strangers, even community leaders and local organizations, expressing their desire to help. It wasn't long before local newspapers and news channels noticed. Journalists were soon reaching out to schedule interviews with Linda, Gary, and Adam, eager to cover the story that had so deeply moved the community. Adam realized that their story was becoming more than a momentary online sensation. It was a spark that had captured the community's heart. Turning to Linda with a warm smile, Adam said, "You were both incredible today. I just want to say again, you're welcome to stay here as long as you need. I'm sure that with this momentum, someone, whether a person or a company, will see this story and step up to help you and Gary find a way out of this situation for good." That evening, as Linda tucked Gary into bed in Adam's modest home, she whispered gently, "See, my love, your mother was right. Even in the darkest times, there's always a ray of light, and it feels like we've finally found ours." She paused, looking at her son with warmth in her eyes. "Adam is such a kind-hearted man, always willing to help others. We owe him a lot and should be so grateful." Outside, under the vast night sky, Adam gazed up at the stars, feeling a mix of humility and inspiration about the journey they had all embarked on together. Though he knew their struggles were far from over, he felt they were stronger now than ever. Meanwhile, the video of Linda and Gary was going viral on social media, sparking a wave of support and solidarity that surged through the community that very night. As Adam, Linda, and Gary started to feel the uplifting effects of sharing their story, an unexpected turn of events began to unfold. In his sleek office, Mr. George browsed the internet nonchalantly when he came across the video that was becoming a topic of widespread online conversation. At first he thought little of it, but then something in the images of Linda, and especially Gary, caught his attention. There was something about that boy, an uncanny resemblance that tugged at his memory. "Who is that boy? I feel like I've seen him somewhere before. It's strangely familiar," George muttered to himself, his curiosity quickly replacing his usual indifference. Determined to investigate the mysterious connection, George called Dennis. "I want to know everything about that woman and the child in that video, and I want it fast," he demanded, his tone leaving no room for delays. Used to George's whims, the assistant nodded and immediately began gathering information on Linda and Gary. Meanwhile, Adam received an unexpected notification. It was a direct message on the same social media platform where he had posted the video, from none other than Mr. George himself. The message read, "Dear journalist Adam, I would like to discuss a matter related to the video you recently published. Please reach out to arrange a meeting." Adam read the message over and over, trying to decipher the intentions behind George's sudden interest. When Linda learned about George's message, a blend of hope and apprehension washed over her. "What could he want with us, Adam? Could this mean we're in danger again? I'm exhausted from the speculations about that man. I almost regret mentioning him in the video." Adam took a deep breath, attempting to calm his racing thoughts. "I'm not sure, Linda, but maybe this isn't as bad as we think. And I'll be right there with you, every step of the way," he reassured her, his voice steady despite the anxiety that simmered beneath. The following morning, as they prepared for their scheduled meeting, Adam, Linda, and Gary steeled themselves for an encounter that could shift the course of their lives. "Whatever he wants, we're in this together, and we'll stand by each other no matter what," Adam declared with conviction, looking at Linda and Gary with a fierce sense of determination. "Let's face this head on, just like we have been these past few days, united and strong." As they headed toward their meeting with George, a swirl of questions filled their minds about the businessman's true intentions. George's unusual interest in Linda and Gary was puzzling, but the truth was close at hand, ready to launch them into a new chapter of their lives. As dusk faded into twilight, George waited in his spacious office, eager for the arrival of Adam and his soon-to-be headline, "Subjects." When they finally arrived, the wealthy businessman greeted them warmly. "You must be Linda," George began, his voice unexpectedly gentle for someone of his powerful reputation. Linda regarded him with surprise, tinged with unease, noting a strange familiarity about him, though they had never met. "And this must be Gary," George continued, his gaze betraying a mix of surprise and fascination. Holding Gary's hand firmly, Linda responded cautiously. "Yes, this is Gary. But I don't understand why you summoned us here when you're the one responsible for us ending up on the streets. What exactly do you want from us?" There was a palpable defensiveness in her voice, a mother's instinct to protect her child from this formidable figure. Noticing her tension, George responded, "Do you really think I should allow guests to stay in my apartments indefinitely? Business doesn't work that way. But after all that's happened, I find myself genuinely curious about your husband. What you mentioned in that video about him and his family piqued my interest." Linda's eyes met George's with a mix of surprise and suspicion, unsure of his motives. His words lingered in her mind, cutting deeply into the silence. "My husband's name was Alexander. He died 4 years ago, taken from us by epilepsy." Linda's face held a quiet strength as she continued, sharing the truth that had been their burden. "After he passed, everything fell apart. Our finances plummeted. But I worked tirelessly, sacrificing whatever I could to keep up with the rent, determined not to lose our home. I can't understand how someone with your power and influence could allow a single mother and her son to be thrown out onto the streets without any regard for what that would mean for us. We were never late on rent before, and the very first time we missed a payment, we were evicted without a second thought. Like stray dogs," she added, her voice cracking with raw emotion, a blend of hurt, anger, and disappointment. George was visibly stunned, his composed demeanor faltering as her words struck him. His face softened, and for the first time, a vulnerability broke through his usual steely gaze. He seemed lost in thought, as if wrestling with something hidden and unspoken. When he finally spoke, a single tear fell down the powerful man's weathered face, and his voice carried a somberness Linda had never expected. "Now I understand why you looked so familiar," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Alexander, he was my son, Miss Linda." Linda's eyes widened, her breath catching. "I was aware of the eviction," George continued after a deep pause, but I thought it was best for the efficiency, growth, and reputation of my company. I believed it was just business, a necessary move. But I had no idea, none, that I was condemning my own son's family to such hardship. I didn't even know he was married, or that I had a grandson. She took a breath, her tone sharpening with a blend of sorrow and resilience. Yes, he was my beloved husband. Despite everything, despite your apparent disapproval of our marriage, he left a hole in our lives when he died, and after his passing, I struggled to keep my son Gary safe and happy, even when everything felt like it was slipping away. And now, here we are, displaced by your order. Our life, fragile and exposed, was shattered by a decision you made in an office without a second thought. George's expression changed, remorse and regret etched into his face. I honestly had no idea Alexander had built a family. I knew he was independent, but I never dreamed he had a child, my grandson, enduring such conditions. This changes everything. My eyes were blinded by ambition, by my relentless drive for success and wealth. I never paused to think about who might be affected. Without realizing who I was hurting along the way, I made choices that impacted lives in ways I can't just brush aside. George admitted this openly, his voice carrying a sincerity that took Linda by surprise. I want to make things right, not only because you're Frank's family, but because it's simply the right thing to do, he continued. That's why he never introduced me to the woman he loved most and their son. He saw the impact of my actions. I'll make sure you have a safe, decent home. One you don't have to worry about. George added, I'm also committed to covering Gary's education expenses. It's the least I can do to begin making up for the harm I caused. His tone reflected a newfound resolve, a stark shift from the hardened businessman he once appeared to be. And about the eviction, that was my mistake, fully. I let ambition blind me to the human toll of my choices. Linda listened, her emotions tangled, unsure how to process George's sudden shift. Yet for the first time in a long while, the thought of a stable future for herself and Gary, free from the constant worry of finding shelter or their next meal, offered her a flicker of hope. She looked into his eyes. If your words become actions, she began, her gaze unwavering, then maybe, just maybe, we can start to believe that there's still some fairness in the world. For Gary's sake, I'm willing to see where this leads. George went on, I know I'm not in a position to ask this, but I am asking for your trust. I'll fast-track everything to make sure you're settled, comfortable, and that you have a job as soon as possible. Whatever support you need, just let me know. I'll be there, willingly. He hesitated for a moment, then added, My son and I, we weren't always close, but he was a good man, and I'm proud of everything he achieved. I know this is what he would want me to do now. After his promise to repair the wrongs done to her and Gary, Linda remained thoughtful, considering both George's influence and the potential his change of heart could bring for their future. Mr. George, she began, her voice steady with a newfound sense of purpose. While I appreciate your willingness to help us, and I believe in your sincerity, there's something more I'd like you to consider. We aren't the only ones who have suffered because of these decisions. There are many other families, many other children like Gary, who've lost their homes to policies that placed profits above people. George, listening intently, gave a slight nod, indicating for Linda to continue. What are you proposing? He asked, curiosity sparking in his gaze. Linda took a steady breath before speaking, her voice calm, yet filled with quiet conviction. I hope you'll reach out, not just to us, but to everyone else who's been pushed out of their homes because they couldn't meet the rent. Her words hung heavy in the air as she urged him to reconsider his approach, to look beyond just her family and find a way to provide restitution for those who had been uprooted. It would mean so much more than one gesture, she explained, her eyes holding George's as she continued. It would rebuild trust in justice, showing that your change is real, that Frank's legacy and Gary's future can be the start of something genuine, a new way forward. Her plea was not only for her own family's future, but a call for broader transformation, one that would restore dignity to the whole community. Georges sat in silence for a moment, clearly processing the weight of Linda's request. Finally he spoke, his tone reflective. "You're right, Linda. Making amends for my past actions cannot end with a single gesture. True atonement demands lasting commitment to change and responsibility." He promised to review the eviction cases, pledging to find ways to support these families, ensuring they had access to resources and the support they'd need to rebuild their lives from the ground up. His response gave Linda a mix of relief and cautious hope. "Thank you, Mr. George," she replied, her voice warm. "Together, I believe we can make a real difference and foster a community that's stronger and fairer for everyone." True to his word, George set his plans in motion over the following days. He initiated a program specifically for families who had faced eviction, offering not only financial relief, but also assistance in finding housing and job opportunities. The news of this initiative spread swiftly, transforming the community's perception of George and sparking a movement of support and solidarity. Linda, witnessing the ripple effects of her conversation with George, felt a deep, abiding gratitude. She knew the journey ahead would still hold its struggles, but now hope had become a part of it, not just for her and Gary, but for many others who had been forgotten. Linda had the reassurance that a community that had developed the fortitude to stand together in times of adversity was protecting Frank's memory and Gary's future at that precise moment. As the months passed, the community continued to thrive with newfound optimism. One day, Adam and Gary stopped in front of Linda's new bakery, a symbol of her resilience and dedication, built with love and hard work after she found steady employment in the job that had been her and her son's lifeline for so many years. Both of them stood in awe, admiring the bright and inviting storefront with the name Linda's Sweet Delights beautifully displayed above the door. "Look at all the people, Uncle Mike," Gary exclaimed, clutching Adam's hand with excitement, his eyes practically glowing. Adam glanced down at the boy, a warm smile spreading across his face. "This, Gary, is all because of your mother's hard work and the support of everyone in our community. You should feel incredibly proud of her," he said gently, guiding Gary inside, where the grand opening was already in full swing. Music played in the background, mingling with the hum of laughter and conversation. Balloons in cheerful colors decorated the store, and tables were covered with neatly arranged plates of sweets, each one vibrant and inviting. Behind the counter, which was brimming with a colorful array of treats, Linda caught sight of Adam and Gary entering. Her face brightened instantly, and her smile was wide and welcoming. "Gary, Adam, I'm so glad you both could come," she called warmly. "Gary, how about you try the very first slice of our special grand opening cake?" "Yes, please," Gary responded, his voice filled with excitement, as Adam gave a supportive nod. "You've done something truly amazing here, Linda," Adam remarked with a hint of playful admiration. "Turning all those struggles into something as sweet as these treats. It's incredible," he teased, watching the cheerful atmosphere that filled the room. Linda chuckled, her gratitude evident as she looked around at the friends and neighbors who had come to celebrate with her. "We couldn't have made it here without the support of friends like you, Adam," she said sincerely. "This place is more than just a candy shop. It's a symbol of everything we've overcome," she added. The glance shared between Linda and Adam was filled with unspoken gratitude and friendship, a promise of a future filled with hope, grounded in the strength of the community and mutual support. Adam's journey, since he first published Linda and Gary's story, had also been nothing short of remarkable. The story's viral spread not only changed Linda's life, but also brought a significant shift to Adam's career. His bravery and commitment to truth in his journalism gained him respect and admiration, causing his social media following to skyrocket. This new attention caught the interest of large media companies, eager to work with a reporter of his caliber. Soon after, he received an offer that would elevate him to a senior position in journalism, a life-changing opportunity that provided both financial stability and the chance to pursue his dream. With this new chapter ahead, he invested in renovating his home, adding a dedicated office that would become a place to continue his work with integrity and dedication to social justice. One sunny afternoon, Linda and Adam sat in this new office, surrounded by bookshelves lined with stories and an expansive view of the bustling city. They had become trusted friends, bonded by the life-changing experience they shared. "Can you believe how far we've come since that first day you came to interview us?" Linda asked, a soft, grateful smile crossing her face. Adam looked around the room thoughtfully before replying. "It almost feels surreal, Linda, but I always felt like your story was one that had to be told. What I didn't realize was just how much it would impact all of us." "It didn't just change our lives," Adam continued. "It also showed everyone the strength of community and the power of compassion." They talked about the challenges they had overcome, the wisdom they had gained, and their hopes for the future. It was clear that while the hardships had passed, the bond they had formed would endure, a lasting reminder of the profound impact of sharing a story of resilience and hope. As this chapter in their story concludes, we want to thank you for being here with us. Your support, through likes and comments, allows us to continue bringing these inspiring stories to you nearly every day. Subscribe to stay connected and to catch the next story. We'll see you in the next chapter.